Now, I know this is going to sound absolutely insane, and might annoy some of you, but in just 1 week, I can sense something might be happening that could end badly. Could Charles Leclerc's natural racing talent be simply overshadowed by a marketing behemoth? I'm guessing what you're thinking right now is, why does this matter? Trust me, the numbers don't lie. Whichever way you view it, you will want to know why I'm up here yapping on about it. Well, it's got something to do with something I truly love. Analytics. Yes, I'm a massive nerd. On the surface, I think it's safe to say that Ferrari posting tons of Lewis Hamilton content over the last few days was successful in getting people fired up and talking about their team. It's quite obvious. However, when you take a step back and really look into the details, the statistics, the numbers generated, the metrics, it's looking really clear that some of the future decisions of Ferrari as a whole might be swayed a little bit more in the British driver's favour, whether or not he's even aware of it. Take a look at this post from social media stat site Zoom, and when it analysed that one photograph of Lewis in his dark suit next to that F40 outside the fabled home and office of Enzo Ferrari opposite the Fiorano test track, it generated, according to their research, 370 million impressions, over 19 million engagements, and a social value of 10.4 million. Now, okay, you're probably wondering, what does social value even mean? That metric is meant to imply the amount of ad spend in theory Ferrari would have had to have spent to get the same effect. And it also doesn't mean that they would have generated $10 million worth of revenue, or this was worth $10 million, but it's quite safe to say that this was very much worthwhile doing, and that it's basically benefiting the party of Lewis and the Scuderia. It also was the most liked post Ferrari has ever seen, crushing Charles Leclerc's previous record, post of his Monza win last year, by nearly 1 million likes. Now already, I can tell that for some of you, people might not be caring about what goes on social media. They would rather have wheel knowledge being put into play here, that people would rather all of this go down and be settled on the track, and I, for one, agree with you. But the truth of the matter is that given how popular Formula One is today, especially with people who are very active on social media, and the power of advertising to generate that exposure even further that Liberty Media has really exacerbated since they took over from Bernie Ecclestone, you simply cannot ignore how powerful that tool can be to not only save you some money in ad spend, but also just get people interested in you again. Because when you couple that with the sport analytics site Sponsolytics, this post of Lewis Hamilton in his Ferrari gear for the first time, the metrics proposed that the sponsors benefited as well. The ones clearly displayed would have gone at a decent chunk of change in theory for what would have otherwise been a casual snap of Lewis resting on a wall, with HP potentially generating $62,000 of brand value alone. In just this first week, all of the newcomers, HP coming in, IBM coming in, UniCredit replacing Santander, they're looking at what Lewis can offer them, Ferrari can offer them, and like, yeah, oh boy! Now, of course, these estimations are indeed that. Estimates. They are based around algorithms that are generated by these websites. They are not meant to be taken as complete gospel. That these are simple implications and guesses as to what might be the prevailing trend. It's nowhere near as tangible as saying just putting down cool hard cash or looking at bank balances. But nevertheless, the act of Lewis Hamilton representing Ferrari with all of their sponsors emblazoned upon his good self, it's going to lead to massive cost savings in terms of advertisement and potential benefits in just the first few days. And it actually continues the trend of Ferrari really not relying on conventional advertisement. They just let the cars and race teams speak for themselves, and this is just yet another example of it. And imagine this going on throughout the entirety of the 2025 season. Now, granted, Lewis is contracted for, I think, 3 years, based off of an interview that Fred Vasseur undertook for the Financial Times. He's contracted through all the way to 2027, with many people thinking that he might retire then and Oliver Behrman would take over. But despite that, 2025 is the only season so far where Ferrari know for sure that they can take on their competition and go for the world titles. 2026 and 2027, they're very much up in the air. No one is quite sure where people will lie in the brand new order. This year, we already know that Ferrari are going to be amongst the favourites when it comes to potential championship contenders. The Scuderia are poised for another battle with long-standing rivals McLaren for the team title, something they just missed out on with Carlos Sainz in tow with Leclerc by a meagre 14 points. They did everything they could in Abu Dhabi to close the gap, something they really should be proud of, and something to take into for 2025, that they are back to where they were at the end of the 2010s with one of the best, if not the best cars on the grid. It was just that mixture of Mercedes and Lewis that was just enough to get in front and really run off with it in 2019. Which is only proven more by the fact they've now got a world champion back on their books, something that they didn't have for the last few years. That is a sign of confidence from the team and the driver that there is a huge belief that Ferrari can do the business again. Maybe that 8th world title is something that Lewis could pursue after all. That it wasn't just some sort of pipe dream that Toto and he might get back to eventually if all goes well. A lot of hopes and dreams, whereas Ferrari, there's something a little bit more concrete. Lewis, I think, is ready to have another go and try and do something that the last two multiple world champions failed to do. I mean, not through lack of trying, mind you. However, there is the matter of the man who really expedited the decline of Sebastian Vettel to consider as well. One Charles Leclerc. In my mind, what is brewing slowly but surely is a potential power struggle going on. Now, you might be assuming that the next part I'm about to yap on about might be saying that, oh, Lewis and Charles, they're about to hate each other. They're going to go to absolute war with one another. Well, not specifically, because I think it's quite evident that in the last few months, both men have done their best to make sure they get off on the right foot and that they are not personalities that don't gel well together. I mean, they're really looking like good, firm friends on a human level. I'm talking about the people around them that might make their situation a little bit more complicated. Where I am going with this is that there might be potential conflicts of interest when it comes to the team principal of the Scuderia and the principal of the entire Ferrari car company, John Elkann, because he is the mastermind of the move for Lewis to come to Ferrari in the first place. And for those of you who might consider themselves to be firm members of the Tifosi, I have mentioned this next bit quite a few times on this channel, and I just thought I would bring it up for people who are new here. And if you like this tidbit, maybe you can just drop a cheeky subscribe while you're here, yeah? Please? Is that there was an informal agreement between Enzo Ferrari and the CEO of Ferrari at the time, Gianni Agnelli, that there would be an effective barrier between Enzo and the car company. Incidentally, Gianni Agnelli is the grandfather of John Elkann, you know. Because simply put, Enzo just wanted to go racing, leaving the car business to Agnelli, on the condition that he could run the racing team with zero interference. So up until the late 80s, Enzo had his way, and he basically just could run it as he saw fit, with a little bit of help maybe from one of the chairman's Luca di Montezemolo. But after his death, the executive branch of Ferrari started to really make itself heard that little bit more, because after all, Luca di Montezemolo was one of the masterminds of getting Michael Schumacher on board in the mid-90s after it became clear that Jean Alesi was maybe not the guy that they were hoping for after 5 years of trying when he was hired in 1991. I mean, of course, this was aided by the fact that there is inherent allure for drivers to go to Ferrari, because if you get a call from them, you do not decline it. And we are seeing this happen again with John Elkann. However, this move seems to be not primarily motivated by the lack of anyone who could win world titles, since, well, they do have somebody already who is capable of contesting for them in Charles Leclerc, but Elkann probably sensed something, an opportunity, to maximise the weariness of Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes, give him something that he wanted, and something that they, the team, wanted. A world champion who's down on their luck, and has the biggest marketing portfolio out of all of them, or even combined. For Leclerc, if you want to be a little bit cynical here, this could be the writing on the wall. It might be that no matter how fast he is on the track, this might prove to be all for naught, that this might not be enough for him to maintain the leadership role of Ferrari. The power of Hamilton's global appeal could overshadow all of his achievements, and potentially influence decisions within the team, some maybe against Fred's will. Now that is the crux of my concerns of this lineup. Whilst Lewis and Charles are mature enough to be good friends in their own bubble, I'm looking more toward the working relationship dynamic between the two leads of the Ferrari movement. Elkann's focus on global marketing and Vasseur's emphasis on racing success might seem complementary on the surface, but these slightly different motives often breed tension. How these visions align or crash together could define Ferrari's future. And it's understandably a huge bind for the team principal of Ferrari, who would rather just get this team back on their feet and go racing competitively against McLaren with no distractions from the boardroom. And it's also a bind for the Tifosi as well. And this comment from Blue Sky user Giuseppe Sapienza alone sums it up perfectly. I'd love to see a Lewis championship win with Ferrari, but want to see Charles win it first. So I can imagine that most Ferrari fans would be equally conflicted. Of course, many people would love to see the likes of Il Predestinato get his first World Championship, all with a car that is looking incredibly competitive if you look what's happened at 2024. And they're taking big gambles in 2025, when the majority of the grid are probably going to be taking it slow and easy, just slightly tweaking last year's cars because, well, there's 2026 to consider. So already that is an enticing prospect that Charles Leclerc might have the best car to hand throughout his entire time in Formula 1. But what is equally enticing could be the arrival of the most successful driver in Formula 1's history, just rocking up to be his teammate. So there might be some trepidation going into this union. Them happy to see Lewis racing for them finally, but maybe reserving judgment until they actually see wins and podiums mount up in their favour. The fundamentals, though, in the data is starting to point to a serious conundrum at play here, which might find its way onto the track. What scenario might be more engaging to the fans and the wider world of Formula 1 supporters? Charles beating Lewis or Lewis beating Charles? Because I think it's quite safe to say that Lewis winning for Ferrari would get way more likes than Charles winning for Ferrari. And, well, you already know that I'm going to probably just allude to the likes of Team LH and the Lecfosi clashing together about which one is superior. If one gets completely screwed over by the other, the conspiracy theories. I mean, you've only got to look to last year with the accusations of sabotage over at Mercedes that George was being favoured over Lewis. But ideally, Fred would want both of his drivers to thrive, securing a clean sweep with a 1-2 finish in the Drivers' Championship and the team title. That would be the dream. But what order would they finish in? As far as Vasseur is concerned, he would want that settled on the racetrack and allow the chips to fall where they fall. It is what it is. But the drawback of bringing Lewis Hamilton into the fold is that the Ferrari chairman has a vested interest now in making sure that the company gets a swift and fruitful return on their $500 million supposed investment in the 7-time world champion. How far will that overreach go, I wonder? And could that come at the expense of Leclerc? Because the spotlight might shift away from the Monegasque driver, because you have to admit that in the turbulent years of Ferrari, he has carried that team considerably. He has been that guiding light to make sure that there is some hope to be had in the future, that all was not looking gloomy and just desperate for the team. Even in 2020, he could get that SF1000 on the podium a couple of times. But to have a driver next to you who thrives on being the team's focal point, losing the status of the lead could affect not just Leclerc's confidence, but his performance and overall faith in the Ferrari dream. Now hang on a minute, I hear some of you say. Surely Lewis coming to Ferrari will not yield the same results of him being at the peak of his powers at Mercedes. He's just turned 40. But then again, you've got to consider that Fernando Alonso is past 40. Fernando's proven that people in their 40s can still do it if they've got the right motivation and training regimen. And even though some pundits will say that they reckon that he's past his prime, including Martin Brundle, he's also partly saying that maybe Lewis still has it if he has the right motivation and the right people behind him. That maybe the malaise that he's had ever since he lost out in Abu Dhabi 2021 could be now a thing of the past. That he might be back to where he was in the best of days, or in the most competitive seasons going in the last decade or so. Because he's already described that brief misty exploratory test session around Fiorano as one of the best moments of his life. He's now got his longtime confidant Angela Cullen back with him after parting ways suddenly in 2023. And a happy Lewis in theory means a happy Ferrari, and that means he is in the best possible condition and mindset to mount that attempt of the 8th world title. That could mean he would become the undisputed greatest driver of all time. Now, some people might say, well, Max Verstappen might win 8 world championships or 9 world championships if he chooses to stick around, and that's entirely possible because Max is still in his 20s. There's still time for him to do so if he chooses to stick around in Formula 1 and he doesn't get sick and tired of the FIA and their shenanigans. But in the here and now, Lewis Hamilton will have done everything he could whilst he was an active Formula 1 driver to beat the 7-time record of Michael Schumacher and get that 8th one. And maybe a 9th one if the car turns out to be really good and it's not down to the wire, that 8th one. Because I think it'd be quite safe to say that after 2021, if Lewis had come out of that with that 8th championship, he would have retired there and then, kind of like Nico after 2016, not really wanting to go through that all over again, having bested the likes of Max Verstappen, knowing where the wind was blowing. And that would have been perfectly fine, because Lewis would have gone out on a high. And Elkann will want that too. Even maybe more so, to do what Mercedes couldn't do. And the riches it would generate in all aspects would be remarkable. Their first world titles since the 2000s, and Hamilton would have been the one to do it. Flood their social media platforms with posts about it, how successful they are, a happy Lewis Hamilton, the number 44 and racing overalls in the car, trophies held aloft, everyone cheering, Lewis being crowd surfed around Maranello. Oh, it would just generate millions and millions, maybe billions of likes, and maybe millions of dollars there to boot, to help recoup the money that they've spent on getting that guy in the first place. Oh, and the sponsors would be really happy indeed. Long-term contracts, extra money. So this is where things get tricky. What do they do with Charles to keep him sweet? Because he's still a valued driver as well. You've got to remember, Fred wants them both to succeed, because he was instrumental in both of them getting into Formula One to begin with. He would rather see the two drivers that he helped raise to get where they are today, just to organically see who was the faster of the two, and that the one that Ferrari would naturally circle themselves around for a concerted effort at the world title, as per tradition. Now, if it were up to me, if profit and engagement were their priority, Ferraris, they'll ideally push to maximise content featuring both Charles and Lewis together, united. After all, they're widely regarded as the two most influential drivers on the grid, which is helped by the fact they have active hobbies and active lives outside of motor racing. They have a passion for music, art, fashion, entertainment, and business ventures in their own right. Hamilton more toward philanthropic ventures, including equity within the workplace and what have you, and Charles Leclerc, well, he has things, including ice cream, but they make them happy, so just let them be them. But again, the Ferrari management and boardroom want success right now. They almost had it in 2024. They definitely want it next year, with a guy who's costing them $100 million a year. And sure, they bent over backwards to accommodate him, but the fact is, though, they want that title. And 2025 might be the only year where they can realistically accomplish it with certainty. So there could easily be edicts from head office to favour Hamilton over Leclerc that might overrule the ideals of the team principal. The line in the sand that Enzo Ferrari establishing back in the day would arguably become the faintest it's been in decades or ever. He wants him to beat Leclerc, or else it may make him out to be a fool. But he might wind up being a fool anyway if the Tifosi are anything to go by, because I don't think you need me to tell you that amongst all the Ferrari drivers that have come and gone, Leclerc, debatably, has the deepest connection and bond to the Tifosi that has ever been seen. He has been there since the beginning of his junior days, associated in some way to Ferrari. It was destiny that he was going to be driving for them in the fullness of time. That 1 year at Sauber, they had that Ferrari connection. It was going to happen. And then look what he does in 2019. He humbles a 4-time world champion. Boom. And then he does it again in 2020. Boom. And now the Tifosi are hoping that he can do the same again with Lewis Hamilton. But then there's the conflict that could be generated and might divide the Tifosi that little bit because, yeah, they want Charles to do it. But then Lewis is there and he might do it right away, but who do they back? It's just that little bit more complicated, but make no mistake, there is a huge contingent of the Italian fan base of Ferrari that Leclerc is the bee's knees no matter who is next to him. Because the emotional journey of the Monegasque to F1 is inspirational. The fandom of the Scuderia had their hearts set on him getting that world title to cap off their adventure together. But now there's also the presence of a man who already has world titles to his name coming in. And the executives, they're banking on the Ferrari-Hamilton package delivering results first, fueled by the massive social media hype that was generated in just a few days. There are going to be 3 more years of this to come, people. And this is something that, if not treated properly and with due respect, could drive a wedge between the fans and the team. Or maybe the team principal and the management overreaching far too much against the wills and desires of the guy who founded the company. Now surely they must take that into consideration. And throughout all of this, Fred will be just caught in the middle, unsure what to do, which driver to favour. He would want to be objective, but I don't think objectivity is going to be something that will play a part here at a team where emotions can run high, and systematically and conventionally, they have backed one driver. It's been very rare that both drivers get equal treatment. Because from one direction, the Tifosi wish for the golden boy to have his day. But from the other direction, the suits look at the numbers from what they've seen now thus far and want their investment to come good as quickly as possible and then generate even more. Again, Charles and Lewis aren't going to be the ones to cause any tension to form themselves, but the people around them? Oh, certainly. Now, what would help Ferrari out considerably is that Lewis just simplifies things by being better than Charles Leclerc fundamentally. He beats him on track fair and square, no team orders at play, and he is the contender from Ferrari to be the world champion for 2025. If that happened naturally and organically with no interference from anyone else, no intervention, just Lewis doing the business, inspired, re-energized with the right people around him in the right car that is tailored to him, then there you go. That's absolutely fine. All will be well. But that is the only absolute ideal scenario. But even then, Charles Leclerc will still feel quite disillusioned and weary after years of trying, 2022, 2024 being years where he could arguably be considered as a championship contender at some point throughout the year, and he wasn't the one to do it. He will have the same effect as the previous world champions of Alonso and Vettel without actually having won a world title, and we all know what that does to people. So yeah, if Lewis becomes the most successful driver, fair play. But like I said, it has to be fair. No team orders, no mistakes that befall Leclerc equal fair terms. Anything less than fairness and equal opportunities will lead to division and conflict between Team LH, the Tifosi, the management, the team. Yeah, it's going to explode. And McLaren, Red Bull, Mercedes, they might be ready to pick up the pieces. And it's just such a shame too, because on paper, this lineup looks remarkable. Leclerc, Hamilton, one of the most potent on the grid. And the people around them might be the ones to be the undoing of both of them, if not careful. So as we've seen a couple of times from Leclerc saying to the media, he will hopefully use the presence of Lewis in the right way to motivate himself to be better than he ever has been before. He'll want to do what he did to Vettel all over again on the track. But hopefully the metrics off track don't get in the way of any of that, and Leclerc has a fair shot. And speaking of getting in the way, the FIA's president has seemingly gone rogue, setting up new penalties for stewards to use against drivers who are non-compliant, which may or may not have been unanimously agreed upon by the FIA at large and rushed through debate. To find out why the GPDA's letter, led by George Russell, might have backfired in a way they did not expect, go and watch this video next, straight after this one. I can't believe it's got any worse than it already had. Oh dear.